to our capstone conversation of the day. With many learnings in your head, with a lot of lemon bars in your tummies, and now we're going to turn to one of the most crucial conversations of the conference, which is the reporting capacity challenge for rural and small town newspapers. My name is Erin Foote. I am the founder and CEO of FM Civic. We're an impact strategy firm based here in Bend, and we partner with visionary, mission-driven organizations just like FORJ to articulate the impact they wish to have in the world, and then we support them to create it. You can learn more about us on our website at fmcivic.org. But I think Heidi asked me to be here on this stage today because of some of the work that I've done over a lifetime, which is journalism and journalism education, with a particular focus on covering rural communities, as well as developing curriculum at the community college level and supporting expansion of that curriculum across the state, including into rural communities. That work has offered an intersection of perspective right where education and the needs of rural community newspapers come together. Engaging trained staff to cover your rural and small town communities. This is a problem across the country, and you've been feeling it in your newspapers. Anyone who came to our conversation last night, presented by Adam Davis, and has read the presentation that's available out on the registration table, knows that for Oregon papers, the capacity challenge is the greatest problem that you're facing, according to this recent study commissioned by FORJ. Today, this panel will spotlight innovations right here in Oregon that are solving this challenge, including FORJ's Future Journalists of America high school program, now working through Central Oregon Community College's Journalism Pathway, which is a model that could expand throughout the state. Place-based mentorship and training models such as Uplift Local's Documenters program. The Earn Your Press Pass program, beginning to take root in local communities, and fellowships that can link reporters with local publications. And that is what all these wonderful people here up on the stage are going to talk about today. And I'd love now to stop talking and let you hear from them. I'd love for each one of our panelists to introduce themselves and just tell us your organization and just a quick snapshot of the program that your organization is leading. And we'll dig in deeper as we move into the program. But let's start here with you, Jan.
Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Jan Pytalski. I'm the senior news editor with the daily Yonder. We are a news outlet covering rural news nationally. So we're dispersed from coast to coast pretty much. We have our roots in Appalachia. We started in Kentucky. That was way before my time, but since COVID, we became fully remote. I'm in Douglas County, in Roseburg, and yeah, we have folks everywhere. And I'm today hoping to talk a little bit about our fellowship program that became it started very innocently and became our sort of solution to some of our larger capacity problems and became this cool pipeline, talent pipeline.
Thanks, Jan. He and I were at a conference in Missouri earlier this year about rural journalism revenue ideas, which is pretty exciting. I'm John Schrag. I am, as Adam Davis outed me last night, soon to be the former co-executive director of Uplift Local, but will remain chair of the board of Uplift Local. We're a nonprofit working in the Columbia River Gorge. I'll tell you a little bit about our work, but my path to the job was I came from Chicago, worked for a nonprofit, back when nonprofits were unusual in the news business, Chicago Reporter, covering race and poverty, investigative reporting in Chicago, came to Oregon, spent some time with Willamette Week, where thanks to Mark Zussman, I learned that I was a pretty good reporter, but a better editor, and that was an incredible lesson to learn. Went on to work for Pamplin Media Group, under Mark Garber. I tend to work for people named Mark, apparently. And with Mark's blessing, as an employee of Pamela Media Group, I began exploring some nonprofit models for journalism. In Oregon, we initially were called Oregon News Exploration. We got some significant funding up front, did a statewide survey. Our survey led us to news gaps in rural communities and news gaps in communities of color, and then diving in deeper, non-English speakers. And that in turn led us to the Columbia River Gorge, where our first newsroom launched. It's a collaborative model. We work with the 3 existing legacy news organizations in the Gorge. And like Jan, I want to talk about our talent pipeline, which comes out of our Documenters program. Our Documenters program serves our English speakers with coverage of public meetings, again, highly collaborative with other journalists. And then our Spanish language news service, which just launched this year, is actually a lot of calendar items and events, because that is what they want first, but we also lean into the public meeting coverage there. And I'd love to talk about the fact that all of our staff now come from the Columbia River Gorge, and they are telling their own stories in the languages that they prefer.
Hi, my name's Torsten, and I'm a board member of FORJ. I also have 35 years as a photojournalist and filmmaker, and I'm, speaking of people who are washed up, that's not what he said, but that's what he meant. I'm retiring from the University of Oregon as a faculty member, and in part, I'm doing that because I have this passion to try to work with news organizations like yours to solve a problem of capacity in a win-win situation. We have emerging journalists who are very eager to do this work, and who need places to learn how to do this work. And I think this is important, whether they're going to be rural journalists or if they're going to go work for the biggest news outlets out there. We need people at those outlets who understand rural America as well, right? And so I'm kind of at the beginning of work. I'm working with Stephen over in Condon. We're trying to get some models together. I think the model that doesn't work is just injecting students into newsrooms without mentoring and guidance and say, here, do this job. Because all of us, young, when we're beginning of our career, we need that guidance. Most small newsrooms don't have capacity to provide that. You can't put a couple of young people in newsrooms and say, hey, could you spend 12 hours a week on these folks? So there has to be a model where mentorship can come from people like us. So that's what we're working on. What else are we working on? There are a lot of other things, but that's what's relevant here.
Torsten, maybe you could talk a little bit about rural Plunge since Lisa's.
Oh, yes, thank you. Lisa, who's not here, is a faculty member at Washington State University up in Washington. And there's 3 of them there, Ben and Lisa and Wendy, who have done just a remarkable job of finding funding and students to put fellows in newsrooms throughout their state through Report for America and another project that's funded by the legislature. That kind of funding is a little easier in Washington because there's more people with fat wallets in Washington than there are in Oregon. But we have a project that's funded by Roundhouse where we take students into rural areas. We call it the Rural Plunge. And it's not really a reporting project. It's just go to these communities, and we've talked ahead of time, and they land usually at a library or a school or an art commission. And these students just go meet people in rural places. And I taught a rural journalism class last year, and we went down by Paisley, if you know where that is, just north of the Nevada line. And I'd arranged to meet a whole bunch of people. We met a rancher named Marie, who's in her 70s. And when we were getting ready to leave, a young man from LA got in my truck, and we were gonna go back to where we were staying. And he looked at me and said, "That's the first time I've touched a horse." And I thought, okay, like we got to go shake hands, not just with humans out there. Like we got a lot of just touching to do here. But he also said, I teach them to shake hands. They fail the class if they don't shake hands, because you got to be. And he said, did you feel Marie's hand when you shook it? And I said, yeah. And he said, that thing was like concrete. And I said, well, 70 years of branching will do that. And then he said, this is a group where one of the students 2 days earlier had said, why would anyone ever live in this place? This kid said, I think my life would be better if I could spend a year with Marie on her end. I said, me too. Let's make that happen, right? So, but back to Lisa. Lisa is instrumental in this rural plunge, and they're very good at it at Washington State University. They're kind of model for the rest of us in how to engage in communities.
Thanks for sharing that. On behalf of Lisa. Lily, tell us about your work.
My name's Lily Raff McCaulou. I'm a freelance journalist based here in Bend, and I also work here at Central Oregon Community College. I'm the advisor for the Broadside, which is the student newspaper at COCC, and I teach all of the journalism classes at COCC, which there are 3. And it's kind of a beautiful full circle moment for me. I started this job in 2021 because I got my start as a journalist in my college newsroom. My first week of my freshman year, somebody kind of ran down the hall of my dorm and asked if anybody wanted to write for the Argus, which was the name of the college newspaper, and I just thought, that's it? You can just write for the newspaper? And I didn't know how desperate they were for writers, and so I volunteered, and it ended up being kind of the dominant experience of my college career. And then I didn't major, there was no journalism major at the college I went to, but I ended up getting my first reporting job in 2001 at the Hartford Courant, and moved out here in 2004 to work for the Bulletin, and the rest is history. And I'm in the last year, I also started working on FORJ's Future Journalists of America program, which is a great program for high school students to get a paid internship. One of the things that I'm sure we'll get into kind of the details of this, but here in Central Oregon, there are only 2 high schools that still have student newspapers at them. So one of the 4 high schools here in Bend still has a newspaper, and there's 1 high school in Redmond that has a newspaper. But Madras, Culver, Prineville, the rest of the Bend and Redmond high schools do not have student newspapers. So there's a real need. And one of the things that I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit is there's just a lot of young people with a lot of interest in storytelling and in journalism. And the flip side of that, working here at COCC, I talk to a lot of people who work in local newsrooms. There are a lot of jobs too that these newsrooms are having trouble filling. So I get to see kind of both sides of that, and it seems like there have to be some solutions. If we've got people who want to do the work and people who need folks to do that work, there has to be a way forward.
Well, let's talk about that problem just a little bit more before we dive into your solutions. A lot of you all have experience working in rural communities. Can you tell us a little bit more about your own experience with the lack of trained folks ready to jump into this work, and how that impacted the coverage of news in the communities that your papers were serving? And I'm going to pick on you, John, just to kick things off from your perspective with Pamplin Media Group, which was in so many communities. And then I want to hear from Jan too, just across the country, the same. Well, let's start here in Oregon. Like, what were you seeing? How does this challenge manifest? How has it manifested here?
Yeah, so when I left Willamette Week, I went to become the editor and publisher of my hometown paper, Forest Grove News Times. I also was the guy who fixed the damn change boxes when they jammed, and I also moved the garbage cans upstairs when it rained because the roof leaked. So you understand what I was doing. I was able to get really highly qualified journalists because I was close enough to Portland. My photographer lived in Forest Grove. That was it. He was the only one in our newsroom who lived in Forest Grove, but the rest were able to come. And they also were able to spend enough time there. It wasn't a problem for them to pop in on a weekend, so they felt like they were from Forest Grove. And we never had trouble recruiting people to come to Forest Grove. When I became executive editor of the Pamplin Media Group, I was able to work with all the publications, and I quickly learned what it's like to be recruiting in a rural community. Prineville, Madras in particular, but even Woodburn, Newburgh. It was tough to get people, particularly young people at the start of their careers, and that was kind of who we were targeting for our vacancies, to come to a rural community. And when they did come, then the question was, 6 months, please, at least 6 months, maybe 18 months, and then they would leave. And so that was a real challenge. And as we developed Uplift Local, we thought, like, how are we going to address that? And we can get into that, but let's first hear about how other people.
Yeah, I mean, let's take it up to the national level. I mean, the Daily Yonder is in communities all across the country. What is this? How does this impacted your career and your experience?
So I think for us, for the longest time, the problem of first priority wasn't that there weren't enough professionals. We didn't have the money to pay professionals. So we have, for many, many years before I joined the organization, the editorial team of two worked really hard on developing a really strong group network of regular contributors who, of course, then themselves have to take on different jobs because we are not providing a full-time employment. We really, quote-unquote, exploded during COVID and right after first after 2016 and then elections and then during COVID, because you know, our funding comes primarily from philanthropy, and that's where the interest was. And so we were lucky in those difficult times that we got an infusion of some funds to try and build out our you know,
Your network.
Yes, network and
Tell us more about how that worked then. So you were receiving philanthropic dollars and you were connecting with folks across the country. How were you meeting them and how were they, were you training them? What did that model, what does this model look like?
So I really am building on and standing on the shoulders of people who put in the hard work before me. When I joined, I was the first full-time hire since the creation of the outlet, and soon after we got enough funding to hire 2 more people and sort of started rolling. It all stemmed from doing much more localized reporting in Appalachia, which is where our roots were, in Kentucky and Tennessee. And from there, slowly, so when I was hired, I was in DC, and that was the first foray into, okay, I'm an assistant editor at the time, but let's try and do a little bit of DC coverage of federal policy that affects rural issues. And so already at that point, we had people pitching us aggressively with stories, freelancers, yes, and we were targeting a slightly different audience. We really, at the time, were talking about the Beltway community. We really wanted to affect policymakers, and all the data that we would get about our readership, like, it wasn't glamorous, but we knew that we are read a lot in those spaces. So at the time when that was the mission, that's what we did. Over time, as we were growing and as we were covering more and more stories as COVID hit and we became remote, we started branching out and really actively looking for people, and that took a form of you know, really using social media, posting in on different boards, letting people know that we're looking. Sort of a lot of traditional channels, a lot of networking.
A lot of work.
Yeah,
That's what I'm hearing. A lot of work, yeah. Well, Lily, can you talk a little bit about what you've seen in Central Oregon? You've been here a long time. You were at the paper, the Bulletin, for 11 years, and now with COCC for a long time. So, good perspective on this region. What has it been like here, do you think?
Well, I mean, I think here we're lucky in Central Oregon that we still have a number of different news outlets, right? We have a couple of TV stations, we have an OPB bureau, we have the Bulletin, we have the Source, we have other local newspapers like the Nugget and Sisters and more. So we have a lot of different newsrooms in Central Oregon. and they need people to work in them. And one of the things that's really tricky is they're small organizations, the pay is low, and the traditional kind of hiring tactic has been you advertise for somebody who has a 4-year degree, preferably in journalism or some equivalent experience. They move here from out of town, and it's not financially viable for people, right? Housing is really expensive here. It's tough to get by on $30,000 a year, which is what some of these jobs are paying less than that. And so we're kind of at this point where what's kind of worked in the past is bumping up against the reality right now, which is that somebody who's 22 who graduates with a 4-year degree probably has $150,000 worth of debt with them, and they can't work for $30,000, and they can't move to Bend to work for $30,000 a year. So what we're seeing is newsrooms that are having to adjust their expectations for who they're going to hire and who's realistically going to come and work for them.
We were talking this week about this.
We were talking about this, yeah. And then we also just have, like, COCC is, I'm the journalism program, so it's a small journalism program, but what we're trying to do is come up with different ways that we can help students who come here who are interested in working in this career get the training that they need right here without having to leave and get a 4-year degree. There are obviously great opportunities for students who have that option, but what we're trying to do is create a pathway that's affordable for people.
The example that Lily and I were talking about this week is my own son, actually. I have a 19-year-old son who's been a storyteller his whole life, wants to get into film, into journalism, and did a one-day job shadow at KTVZ, one of our local channels here, and they have offered him a job as a producer. He's 19. He starts next week. He has a videography and photography certificate from COCC from his 1 year here so far, but we're talking about a producer of a daily, journalism program, and we need youth like him who want to go into these fields to continue to have access to training, just like the kind that Lily's providing here. And so these students are still here, right? And we need to train them. And I'd love to, go ahead, jump in if you like.
Well, I was just going to say, that's one of the things that's been really fun and exciting for me working at COCC and working with FJA, the Future Journalists of America program, is that there are so many young people that are excited about journalism, that are interested in going in. They would like to work in this field, and if they could see a viable career path, they would choose it. And so one of the things that we need to do is help make a career path for them that is viable, because we know that this work is important, we know that these jobs are important, and the jobs are here. So it's very inspiring and hopeful, I think, doing this work, because it just feels like there have to be solutions out there. But one of the things that's been really fun for me in this position is just meeting so many. I don't know how many of you hang out with young people. They're really great. And it's really fun. I mean, they're energetic. They care about the community. They care about the truth and storytelling, and they have a lot of energy. They're not necessarily jaded and cynical about journalism the way some of us who've been in the business for a long time can kind of lean left to our own devices. So I see a lot of reason for hope, and I do see a lot of young people that have an interest in it.
I just want to do a quick audience poll here. In your communities, how many of the high schools still have a journalism program that are producing young, inexperienced maybe, but journalists in your towns? Okay. And do you have a relationship with those newspapers, student newspapers? I see one hand. Is that really true? Interesting.
Can I
Yeah, and Torsten, would you jump in here from the academic perspective on this?
This is really from a professional perspective. I think we often think that it's a one-way street, that we can offer young people a path into the profession, and we're doing them a favor and all of that. It's two ways. If we want journalism to survive, it cannot be the journalism of 10 years ago. It has to be the journalism of the future. And I don't know, I mean, washed up, is that what I said?
You did.
Yeah. We are not the future. You know, we can help facilitate that, but Ruby, yes? That's the future. And not only do we need Ruby as a journalist and as a reader, we need her to be innovating and designing the next generation of journalism. Journalism has to evolve, not just business models, which are super important. It doesn't work at all without that. But so we need these young people, not just to plug gaps in the paper, but that's important. When Andrew was giving his talk right before this on AI, it was Ruby who brought up the ethical considerations of using AI. Not as far as journalism, but just because they use so much energy and water and all of that. That's what we need in our newsrooms.
Nice work, Ruby.
Thank you.
Yeah, please.
I just want to say that if you are one of the people who raised your hand and there is a student newspaper in your community, a really fun idea would be to reach out to that student newspaper and see if you can go and visit with those students. And just like Torsten was saying, I mean, you will get as much out of it as the students will. It's such a fun way to spend an hour of your time. And in my experience, you know, I mean, there's only 2 high school newspaper advisors in Central Oregon. I know them. They like having journalists come in and talk to the students, and they'll enjoy having a conversation with you, and you will enjoy it too, and you might get some story ideas. You never know.
Awesome. John, I see you want to jump in and please.
Yeah, I think so. I think Future Journalists of America, #1, brilliant branding, Heidi. I thought so from day one.
Trademarked.
Just amazing. But also a great pipeline. But there's another pipeline as well. And just like Lily said in her college dorm, and she heard anyone can write for the newspaper, your communities are filled with people who don't know that they could help you. And at the panel, someone said that 10 years ago their head would have exploded if it was you, if you had heard about something. 10 years ago, if you had told me that I'd be promoting the concept of citizen journalist, my head would have exploded. Because there were journalists. I was a journalist, damn it. And there were journalists, and then there was everyone else. And how dare we let them practice our sacred craft, because we are special people. And in what we found in the Columbia River Gorge was there were no journalists to hire. And there was not a pipeline of high school journalists. And we did not yet have a connection, though we're building one with the community college. So how do we hire journalists if there aren't journalists? Well, the idea is you hire people who are not journalists, but are good storytellers. And our solution, which isn't the solution for everyone, is a program called Documenters. And I'm happy to talk to anyone about it. #1, it is expensive. I can tell you all the details. If you're a 1 or 2 person shop, it's not going to work for you. But we train and pay community members to go to public meetings. All they do is take public meeting notes. They do not create stories. It's very scripted. All their notes are fact-checked. And then once they're fact-checked, those notes go on a website where anyone can read them. They have more engagement than I thought they would have. But the real value for us is then we take those meeting notes and turn them into stories. What we didn't realize, though we were told, and I didn't believe, is this is a talent pipeline. So we currently employ 4 people: Viviana, Christian, Maria, and Swen. So first of all, look around this room. Look at who's sitting here. Yeah, Oregon is the whitest state in the West Coast, but it's not this frickin' white. So there's a problem with journalism in that it is not representing the rural communities we want to serve. The 4 people I named, 3 are bilingual, bicultural. None of them thought they would ever work for a news organization. How did we find them? They went to public meetings. Their notes were really good. They were really curious. Of the 50 or so documenters we've had, most of them we would not hire. and that's okay. They're doing great going to public meetings. Some of them are no longer going to public meetings, but we found 4 people in the Columbia River Gorge who are going to be pretty good journalists. 3 of them are bilingual, bicultural. So there is talent in your own communities. The question is, how do you find them? I think a way to do it is pay them to go to public meetings. You're going to get something out of it, and there's trainings. I think programs like FORJ is doing, where if you can get people trained to go to a public meeting, and then you pay them a little bit of money to cover a public meeting, and if you do 10 of them, and 8 of them bomb out, but you get 2 freelancers, one of whom becomes a staff member, wow, that is pretty exciting. So that's what we're doing, and I'd be glad to talk to people about it. I am going to talk to the folks who run documenters, because it was designed for urban communities, and it's really struggling a bit in rural communities. We are the only rural bilingual documentary community they're working with, and it needs to be adapted so that it's open to more people like you. But I do think, I would not have believed we could have found these people in the Columbia River Gorge this quickly, and brought them onto our staff.
John, where does your funding come from to cover the cost of these folks, the training and then the ongoing participation?
Like a lot of nonprofit new startups, we are overly reliant on foundations. So thank you for the foundations in here. We know that foundations want us to find a more sustainable model within the next few years. So we have a very aggressive, ambitious membership plan, a membership plan that will reward not only dollars given us, but volunteer time. So if you want to go put up a poster at the McCaulou talking about our Spanish language news service, you're going to get points. If you give us a $5 contribution, you get points. So membership, and then individual donors. And I came from the for-profit news world. I don't think advertising is a dirty word. I would love to get people to advertise and underwrite our content, as long as we do it in collaboration with the existing news sources. I will not steal an advertiser away from Chelsea Marr. I want everyone in this room to know it. She's not here. I would not do that. It would be very bad for us if we harmed any of the local legacy papers. So, but I think we've developed such good relationships that we are going to explore that. How can we work together? She would love to reach the Spanish-speaking audience. We would love to reach her advertising base. I think there's win-wins out here for us. And I think we've heard a lot. I think experimentation in rural communities is the way to go. We can fail fast, we can repair relationships, we can get crosswise and go out and have coffee and sort it out and start again the next week. So I think it's really exciting. I am leaving my professional career this weekend. I'm going to stay on as the board. And what a way to go out on a convention gathering that's filling people with hope. So thank you for that.
Even though you didn't want to invite to know.
Well, Adam.
Yeah. Before we jump off the Documenters program, John, can you just tell us a little bit more about what that training looks like? And is it accessible to the folks out here? Can they tap into this program?
Yeah, it is really good training, and no, it is not accessible to you, and that is the problem. So we pay $12,500 a year to belong to the Documenters program, and for some of you, that is, okay, end of conversation, and I get that. I would like to talk to them about, that builds a lot of back-end stuff. They do website scraping for us, they do free training for us, and the training is excellent. They host the website where it's, where all the Documenters notes are posted. I would like them to come up with a Documenters Lite, or maybe it's a Documenters Rural, that could lower the cost, maybe provide the free training. The training is really good. And so then what you'd be on the cost for is how much you pay people. We go above minimum wage. We figure it costs us with the reporter, the documenter time, the fact checking, the posting, it costs us about $75 for a meeting, which isn't all that much. And then if we need to translate it, then the cost goes up considerably.
Okay. Thank you. I know I want to talk to each of you a little bit more in depth about the programs that you're leading, but this feels to me like a great time to be talking about the Earn Your Press Pass opportunity here in Oregon, which is, again, citizen journalists being trained to participate. Tell us about it, Torsten.
Well, Heidi can tell us more than I can, but it's part of, you can find it on the FORJ website, and the idea is exactly this, that we, it provides the initial training, just kind of the beginning of training to someone who's interested in working with their local news organization to cover the basics of news, how to go to a meeting, how to go to a sporting event, how to go to some event in the community and come back with something that's useful to the local paper. And I think, Heidi, you can correct me, but it feels like the first step that you would take with somebody who was going to start working. And
Sort of like going to a public meeting.
Turns into a vetting, you know,
Yeah.
who thinks they want to do it versus who really wants to do it. And this can be, and have we, it's
Yeah.
kind of, it's brand new for us, right?
Yeah, we've had the program now for a while, but we've not really utilized it. So with Torsten's ability, you know, with his capacity now expanded, I think we're gonna give it a shot
Yeah.
and see how it goes. But the idea is just to get, you know, community members who are trusted, and every community has people that, you know, are embedded in the community rather than a reporter who has to try to establish a relationship there, which takes
Heidi.
a long time.
Come and talk in the mic.
Oh, wow.
Thank you. Tell us more about it.
Anyway, it's a national program, and FORJ did purchase the program. We've not utilized it yet, so this is truly an experiment for us to learn more about it. But I've gotten great feedback from around the country on it, and it's just a way for, you know, community members that you all might be comfortable with. It's not for everybody, but maybe there's somebody in your community, maybe there's a librarian or a historian that would, with some training, be a resource for you. Still the back end of it, and I think that's what John's dealing with, is the editing, you know, and making sure you are able to vet their information and get it in the right AP format. And maybe Jim would help us out with that. You know, anyway, it's just a good start, and it's not that expensive. We've already purchased it. I think we have maybe 40 hours of time with it that under what we've already purchased. But I've heard a lot of good things about it from around the country. It's not an end-all be-all, but the idea is, rather than saying, okay, we could maybe start a 2-year journalism certification program around the state with COCC. That would be great. You know, in 3, 4, 5 years, people are going to go through that program, and perhaps they could take remote learning, place-based learning, and be available in rural communities that they aren't right now. In the meantime, maybe the Earn Your Press Pass program could be a backfill until folks could get through some sort of a certification program. And I think one of the dreams both Lily and I have is that perhaps we could get to a point where if there were enough supports around your organizations, perhaps there would be enough money freed up because you're stabilized, you're sustainable, that these journalists that could come through this program could qualify for state CTEC money, which means you're going to get a higher wage and you're going to get more people attracted to it. So that's all part of the idea anyway. So that's where we're going. That's where we hope to go.
And the only thing I want to add to this is that this is not a new idea. In my first journalism job in New Ulm, Minnesota, when I was brand new in town, I was considered an ethnic minority because I was Swedish instead of German. And you know, I was an Auslander, they would call me. And but the point was I had a ton to learn about this community and how to be the first person I went to was Sharon, who had lived there her whole life and was a reporter at the paper. I had, you know, and she was someone who'd grown up in the community, 0 journalism training. I worked at the paper for 12 years. The same was true when I worked for a little paper in southern Indiana. You know, that as a newcomer, you know, it's like you'd come back and think, I'd have to ask one of the people who was local in the newsroom, what the heck did I just experience? What does this mean? And so this idea that you incorporate the knowledge of people in the community to produce a good paper, like we're not inventing that. I'm not letting the cat out of the bag, right? Like this, we're just doing what's always happened in journalism.
Trying to make a livable job.
Yeah.
The one thing I wanted to add is, although I am a convert to citizen journalism in a big way, I think where it really works is the pairing that he was just talking about. So Viviana, in our newsroom, she's our reporter. She literally didn't think it was legal for her to be a journalist because she didn't have a college degree. I mean, and that might sound silly, but people think, they don't know about it. They think it's a closed, like, oh, you can't be a journalist without a degree. And we're like, oh yeah, you can. And it's a long time ago, it was very common. What works for Viviana is she's paired with Emily Harris, a very good investigative reporter, used to work for Reveal. So you have someone who's got the trust of the community, particularly the trust of the Latino community, working with someone who has no trust in the community, but has the journalism skills. So the pairing of citizen journalism, community journalism, whatever label we want to talk about it, paired with professionally trained journalists. I think that is the secret sauce. I'm not trying to put journalism schools out of business. I've got 2 degrees, so I'm not anti-journalism school. I think the key is how can we match the talent, the local talent and the local trust with the expertise that we have in professional journalism.
Excellent. Jan, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how the Daily Yonder is tackling this problem. Yeah, tell us more.
Yeah, so, sorry. So we started our fellowship program for a couple of reasons. First, we wanted to address the sort of diversity and representation gap that we identified in our newsroom. We obviously are very interested in educating the new generation of reporters who are aligned with our vision of reporting on rural America. And then, of course, we always have capacity issues. So in a short to medium term, we thought, this is a good way of helping our newsroom with that. And the way we approached it, we really leveraged, or tried to leverage, our connections, our networks, our board's network, and we very aggressively went after, all kinds of institutions that we could then partner in creating the program. So a couple partners that we've worked over the years: Columbia School of Journalism, Emma Bowen Foundation, Scripps Howard, INN, Lohr Foundation out of Colorado. So the way we approached it, we partnered with those groups, and they would either handle the outreach and initial sort of sorting of candidates and send already sort of narrowed down, pared down group our way, or we would do it together, or it would be on us fully. They would just provide funding. It really varies from funder to funder, from organization to organization. But what it does for us is, first of all, helps with finding people who are genuinely interested in what we do, because they go through that organizational sort of structure that very clearly states what we're looking for, what they're looking for. So very rarely do we meet candidates who are not clear on what we're doing or where we're trying to get.
So these are journalism sort of focused folks who are
for the most part,
become aware of the
yes,
fellowship.
but very often those are folks who have multiple degrees or specialize in other things, and journalism is sort of a secondary thing. They want to leverage their expertise because precisely they believe themselves to be storytellers first, not necessarily journalists in this old school kind of way that we understand. So that's how we approached it, and over time, as our cohort grew, we also realized that actually what we've sort of what we've done by accident is we kind of solved our hiring problem, which was we've had a couple instances where we went through really long and painful process of finding the right candidate and filling the spot, and then they would quit after 3 months, and we're like, okay, and so we lost all that time, money, whatever paperwork needs to be scrapped. With folks in our fellowship program, we essentially provide a service for them. It's an educational part of it. They help us with our work, and in the process, we get to know each other, and in the end, more often than I would ever assume, we end up with incredible employees. And right now, most of our core staff are all our fellows, former fellows, who became, and now it's this group of incredible young people who are doing some of our best original reporting, who helped us sort of rethink how we use social media, because we were all just being, you know, whiny about the TikTok and stuff, and so they you know, helped us use it appropriately. So yeah, our data editor, Sarah Millat, one of our first fellows, data editor. I mean, she's doing fantastic work. Does all the number crunching. I don't know how we would do it without her. I'm too, you know, thick for that stuff. And she's like way better. And so, yeah, it's a tremendous success story for us in that sense. Yeah.
Do you feel like this? What other, you know, what is there? The model that you all are working with. Do you see an application to, for instance, some of the folks here? Do you think that there's a way that they could be developing a similar model around funding from philanthropy or to bring fellows into their newsroom? What is the application for like rural journalists that may be here, do you think?
Yeah, so that's where I need to make this caveat that we, because we are this fully remote national newsroom, I realize that it's much easier for me to attract those candidates, work with them, because they don't have to be place-based necessarily. So I don't have to think about housing for them. I don't have to think about, you know, a lot of things that I realize small local newsrooms struggle with. I do think there are ways to try and make it happen. I think community colleges are a huge asset. I think if you have high schools that still have those programs, that's definitely an asset that you can try and utilize. And I think, I mean, yeah, it's just really so unique to each community. I feel I sort of struggle to speak to that because I'm just not.
Well, what I hear in what you're talking about, and some of the rest of you, are partnerships. That, you know, you know, you've reached out to just journalism schools, philanthropy partners, but in a local community, partnerships can look like libraries. You know, they can look like even the folks that come to city council meetings a lot. There's all kinds of partnerships at a local level that can be built to bring a pipeline. I just wanted, you know, each of you, we've talked just a little bit in other ways about partnerships. Can you talk a little bit about what it might look like for some of the rural folks here to begin to think about what a partnership would look like that would bring real talent into their newsrooms that could stick? And of course, there's partnerships in the programs that we've talked about, our new press pass, the community college, you know, journalism program that's building now with FORJ's support. But what do you see? What's an opportunity? What are some of the convenings that these folks could bring together in their towns to be able to generate some of these connections that can lead to a stronger ecosystem and pipeline in their own communities?
We were lucky to be able to have funding to do actual research in the Gorge, and I think what we found in the Gorge, a lot of it is applicable to many rural communities. So what we asked is people, where do you get your information? And the local news sources were a primary and very valued source of information, but there were others, faith communities. For particularly the Latino community, there's a McCaulou in town, and that's where to get their information, bulletin boards. So I think, and then also some nonprofits, healthcare organizations. A lot of people get information from healthcare workers. So if you go to your communities and ask people, where do you know, aside from us, where do you learn about this beloved community that we share? Find those organizations that are trusted in disseminating information, and then partner with them. Will they disseminate news for you? When we were recruiting for documenters, we had a lot of the nonprofits in the Gorge recruiting on our behalf in both English and Spanish. And so I think if you take the time, I think what you'll find is people in your community value your work. They definitely valued the work of the existing media in the Gorge. And once they learned that we were there to support them, not replace them, they were happy to support us. And so a lot of nonprofits, I think, faith communities, as I mentioned, healthcare, libraries. We're constantly surprised how many people find us by something we place on a bulletin board at the post office. So I think be creative and realize that people do want to probably help you in your work.
The answer I have is I don't know. I really don't. And part of what Stephen's working on in Condon is to try to keep the newspaper alive, but also try to test some models of what works. And I think that's where we have to be at. So I'd like to flip it a little bit, just ask, maybe it's the wrong time, maybe you're the moderator. Maybe,
Well, I don't know what you're gonna
at
say.
some point, I would like to ask those of you who have these newsrooms, can you imagine a model where an emerging journalist came and worked with you? If they came with some support for their salary. We have the Snowdens at the University of Oregon, which is a great program if you can afford to pay for half of an intern, which is most newspapers, small newspapers cannot. But if we can find a model where there's some support financially and some mentorship, does that sound like something that would work for you?
Yes.
In Mackenzie?
Yes.
Yeah?
I was actually going to say, kind of out on the coast. Oh, sorry. I would just
Bring me a mic.
I was going to just say on the coast, I have not found that many of the young are really looking for those kind of partnerships because there are programs, scholarships, schooling, etc. Many of the people that approach me, and I'm very small bandwidth, but approach me that want to contribute or write or whatever, are people in their 30s and 40s. Some of them don't have the journalism background, but they do have other writing or this or that. And many of them are the ones, or retirees. And so those are the ones that I'm trying to figure out, how do I provide them resources besides just giving them blank space to do? What else can we use to kind of do an in-kind service type thing? But, and I understand that the panel is very education based on journalism background, but on the coast, I have found that most of the people interested don't have any of the educational
So
background.
what do you need to make that more effective? To make those people more effective as partners with you?
Honestly, I think mine is, I've been trying to figure it out as I go myself for the last 3 years. And so I've almost had like the imposter syndrome, especially coming here and listening to some of your guys' background and education and stuff. And so I think mine is even the confidence of knowing what to tell them or to say, hey, I am sustainable. I want you to contribute to my paper because I know it's going to be great. I don't. I'm still trying. So I think some of that is my own confidence or something to give them as a resource in that stage of their life. And just knowing more, because it is easier for the kids and the high school students to give them all the resources because that's what everybody's wanting to cultivate. But many of us that are laid off or job changes or life changes, we're looking for something or we've went through trauma or something and we're trying to communicate differently with people. And that's the people that are really wanting to reach out. Many move to the coast for a different life or healing and they want to communicate and share.
Can I say something? Yeah, please.
I wanted to say that at COCC, we have a lot of community college students that are not 18 to 22. So a lot of the students that we have here that are taking journalism classes, and they may not even come into one of my classes thinking that that's a career path for them. They're just maybe trying to work on their photography skills or their writing skills for something else. But we have students in their 40s, 50s, 60s that join the student newspaper and end up finding a lot of satisfaction in it. And one of the things that I would recommend, and I'll also say my educational background is I just got this job in 2021 and kind of had to wing it because I didn't know how to teach journalism. I'd never taken a journalism class before. And so I totally get what you're saying. And I would suggest, I don't know what the community college situation is like on the coast, but there's probably a community college somewhere around there that has some kind of journalism presence.
No, but they are starting in this area, and I think they're very open to communications, especially if we can say, hey,
like, COCC's got it.
Yeah.
You guys communicate with them. I think
Yeah.
they're very open
Or
to that.
even like a communications course or something, because one of the things that we've done at COCC, and again, this is like so many of the things that we've done successfully at COCC in journalism, the numbers are really small. It's not like we're not scalable yet, but again, just like knowing that there are these newsrooms around Central Oregon that need people, when I have a student who's really interested and really excels, I start thinking about, okay, where could I put them in an internship? And so we've had students, and one of the things at COCC, we have a lot of diversity in our students too. So these students are bringing a lot to the local newsrooms. So we've had students, we've had a couple of students intern at the Bulletin, we've had a couple of students intern at the Redmond Spokesman. We've had, there's another publication too. But what we can offer is a lot. So this is a student who's been vetted, right? They've taken some journalism classes. They get some mentorship from me while they're interning. COCC has been able to pay the students, so they're not actually employees of the newsroom, so we can pay their full salary. And we can get the student college credit too. And so a lot of times, like we had a student at the Redmond Spokesman who was bilingual and could cover a big portion of the Redmond community that their full-time news staff couldn't cover. And they're not always young people. So even if it's somebody who could maybe take a communications class at the college, just having some kind of connection with the staff there. But there are ways to do that. We have like a course code, and so the student can get credit. We have more funding than most newsrooms do at community. I mean, community colleges complain about lack of funding, and rightfully so, but I've worked in enough newsrooms to know we don't really have that much to complain about. It's all relative. And we have some funding and some flexibility, and so that's just a resource that I would consider. And it doesn't have to be a pipeline like from them to you. It could be, here's a person who's in their 50s who's interested in journalism. Maybe you point them to the community college course, and then they can get them back to you. Because one of the things that I've done with my student interns is I'm touching base with the student every week and also with their supervisor at the newsroom. So if that student needs a little extra help with writing leads or, going over AP style, I can provide that, and the editor doesn't necessarily need to, because I know they're really strapped for time.
I think what Lily's identifying is just the incredible opportunity that we have when we think about partnering with community colleges. And Heidi was mentioning it before, but we have 17 community colleges serving the entire state. And for a program that could be developed it's really kind of being piloted here at COCC, that could spread to these other schools where there could be one course or maybe more, but some kind of certification in being in basic reporting, and to be able to have a more realistic, real training, but not a ton of time and commitment to get folks trained up in communities that are already being served by these organizations. And as Lily said, there's resources there, and it's the mission of them to provide staff, to meet the local workforce need. So there's just infinite opportunity.
We're hoping that eventually we can have some sort of program where we can offer remote training. So, and we don't have that set up formally yet, but I will say that if you hit a dead end with your nearby community colleges, call me, and we may be able to work something out, because we do have students that attend remotely. So that's cool.
I just wanted to quickly respond, because I really identify with the imposter syndrome a lot. I don't have training in journalism. English is my second language, so every day I'm like, they're gonna find out soon. And so, but I wanted to say that because I rattled off the list of the organizations that we partner with, but people who are interested, young folks who come for those fellowships, vast majority are not journalism majors. They're just interested, they see value in good journalism, and they think that their training and their expertise can be translated into good journalism. So, I think folks on the coast, have expertise. And really what being a reporter first and then editor taught me is I stopped being precious about my writing. Like it's just, you know, it's not the great American novel every time. And so that can be taught, and it's easier than it seems. It's just repetition, a lot of that. But that expertise, that's years, you know, if you have a fisherman on the coast who's been doing that for 2 or 3 decades, he can explain it better than anybody else. So your role, our role, is to kind of help him put it, you know, succinctly enough so that others can read it and absorb it. One of our most valued contributors that I just love, I was telling someone that whenever her piece comes into my inbox, I'm like, nobody touch it. Like I'm reading it and editing just because I want it, because it's so good and so clean. Also, she's, you know, in her mid-60s, a former whitewater outfitter, like no journalistic training. Phenomenal. I mean, we love her stuff, does a great job. Came to us, just sort of proposed, pitched a story, it became a column, and now I'm going to defend it to the last breath. You know?
So thank you. That does make it feel a little bit better. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That made me think of something. This morning, Charlie Brown talked about this guy, Richard Young, who I happened to meet at a conference, and Richard gave a talk about the importance of civic engagement. And what he said, and it stuck with me, and I have a really bad memory, so the fact that I remember this shows how important it is. He said, holding a local government or institution accountable is good. Empowering someone to hold their own government or local institution accountable is better. And so that's what you're doing, is if you're taking people from your community and saying, you can hold people accountable. And holding people accountable doesn't mean putting them in jail. It sometimes means promoting their work. So that's what you are doing. And when you give, people feel so empowered when they're like, wow, the library called me and said because of my story they had more turnout than they ever had. And like, yeah, you have power. Or when, the mayor said he didn't like my coverage of the public meeting, what do I do? Like, don't worry, we can fix this. The mayor called you because you have an impact. So I think that's what you can all do, is just remind people in your communities how much impact you have for the community, how important you are, and tell the stories. You have great stories to tell. And so tell them, and I think you'll find the support.
Well, let's go ahead now and take some questions from the audience. Jodelle is gonna, I see the mic is here by Ken, and he can go ahead and get started.
Yeah, when you asked about, I put my hand up, putting journalists to work in our area, because it's a fire-affected area, some of the stories would be about federally funded programs that have worked and others that haven't. I could use help with that. I'm a one-man show, but there is some good detail on that as well. I talked to Heidi at the ONPA about something that's just happened that we weren't aware of. Because of the fire, indigenous routes, trade routes, are now exposed, but they won't be in existence much longer. The forest is going to take over and bury them again. It's really important to cover that, but I don't have time.
A common concern. I mean, that's the capacity crisis.
Yeah.
Well, I think one thing that springs to mind is, and I think this conference is the perhaps start of that, is how does someone know what are the resources available in Oregon as far as journalism? I mean, Underscore News, which is based in Portland, covers indigenous populations throughout the Pacific Northwest. You probably don't have any connection to Underscore, but it'd be great if there was some place where you could go and say, I have never covered indigenous populations. I have a very timely story in my community. Who might be able to help me? And for you to know that there's actually a nonprofit newsroom in Portland that does tremendous work on that topic. So I think that's one thing that needs to happen, is how do we leverage the resources that we have that people don't know about.
Absolutely perfect comment, John. And it does, thinking about just a little bit of one of these pillars that FORJ is attempting to build on is a shared resources strategy. to really understand what kinds of stories can be shared throughout the state that may be interesting to others, and then just how to plug folks in across the state. It's exactly the kind of network that you're talking about.
Fire is a story not just in your community.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a statewide, region-wide, national story. We just talked about Minnesota. I have a cabin in northern Minnesota that's 2.5 miles from a big fire right now. I don't know if I'm going to have a cabin that much longer, and there was just a story in the Condon paper about the little town of Spray, where a load of contaminated water came in. All of a sudden, the firefighters who were camped out there didn't have enough water or food, and the story was really about how the community rallied to take care of these firefighters. That's not a local story only. It is a local story that has legs broadly and regionally, and there is an opportunity here for us to link the coverage more completely, so that if someone writes that story about Spray, you can also reference what's been happening in Sisters or LeGrand or Klamath, on the coast, whatever. That would empower the news that you all can provide to your community with more content.
And I'm guessing, I think there's been a lot of hallway conversations, and our research surfaced in the Gorge, interest in every topic, but there's some of particular: education, not surprisingly, healthcare. And I'm sure a lot of you in your rural communities are feeling like, I don't know how to cover this giant, complicated system. What's the difference between, why does Medicaid pay for old people? I thought that was Medicare, not Medicaid. And you probably don't know that there's an incredible news organization based in Oregon called the Lund Report, and Erin Hoover Barnett back there is from it. It's a resource, and let's explore ways where, you don't know how to read a hospital annual report, but Nick Budnick sure does. And maybe there are opportunities for partnerships on the journalism side, partnerships on the funding proposal side. I think, again, what Heidi envisions here in rural Oregon, let's start rural, but it could build beyond that.
Further questions? Oh, right here.
Yeah, so I kind of just wanted to second a lot of what was said about citizen journalists and say a little anecdote on how we brought that into our newsroom in a really successful way. So when I first started with NR Today in the fall of 2024, we had a gap in our crime coverage, and we were trying to figure out someone who could fill that role in our community. And a former officer with DINT, the Douglas Interagency Narcotics Team, had just retired, and we figured that we would give him some guidance and let him step into that role, and he was easily one of the best crime reporters I have ever seen due to his experience with that. Not just because he knew how to kind of navigate a lot of the local networks and systems, he knew just who to talk to, where to find documents, but it was also because his experience in that career made him fearless. He knew how to really approach really difficult interviews, really difficult subjects, and he knew how to approach that carefully and in a way to get exactly what he wanted because of his experience as a detective. So I just kind of wanted to encourage that, people to look in their area at maybe some people who have experience in these careers and think of how those skills can translate into a reporting role, because we turned a source of ours into one of our best reporters.
Awesome.
How did you feel about the role?
So every time we would compliment him on a story, we'd be like, Pat, this is phenomenal reporting, you did a great job. He'd be, it's good, but I'm not a journalist like you guys. And it's like, he was easily like one of the best people on our team. So, it goes to show kind of what you were saying about how there's people all in these communities who have the capability, they have the skills to be phenomenal journalists, but maybe they just don't realize it, and it needs to be encouraged.
And everybody doubts themselves too. Even the incredible reporters, they all have imposter syndrome.
Yeah, just spend time in a big newsroom sometime if you want to walk around and experience a bundle of insecurities.
If there was a big newsroom.
Yeah.
Who has a question? Oh, right here, Brendan. Brandon.
It's close enough. Starts with a B. I generally respond to it.
It's the E at the end. Yeah.
No, we're getting to a phase as a startup newsroom where now I think that we're in a position to offer an enriching experience for young journalists to get a lot of experience really fast. But I do also recognize that there's a big learning curve and you don't want to give too much too fast. That would scare the young journalists away. So as a bunch of educators and people who have worked with young journalists here, how can a young newsroom prepare to bring somebody in that will be able to cover a whole lot of what we have going on without burning them out in 3 months?
It's a great question because you all, I mean, who's a journalism teacher that's also running a newspaper, right? Like maybe some tips, maybe.
Well, the fact that you're asking that question means that you're light years ahead of all the intern managers that I had as a young journalist. So kudos for even thinking about that. I think that a lot of the young people that I work with are pretty aware of their own kind of mental health needs and their own capacities, definitely more than I was when I was young. So, you know, just having that conversation and kind of remaining aware of the threat of burnout and kind of just checking in with them regularly. You'll be fine. They'll be fine.
All I want to add, I agree completely with that. Also, I think you have to prepare yourself because some of these young people are going to rock your world because they do not, I said this in an earlier session today, they don't come into the world thinking that journalism is a written word on a piece of paper. They come in with a much broader sense of what journalism is. So if you send them out to do a story about a musician in your community, they're going to come back with audio and maybe video. And they may want to do a podcast of that. And the story might be 300 words because that gets the job done. So you have to be willing to adjust what you think of as that too. And that's what I was talking about early in this conversation, that like this is why we need those young people, because there is a ton of unutilized, Andrew was getting to this, unutilized resources in the form of media that are not being used. This has always been, I'm a photojournalist. I'm the guy, you know, when I got into this field, they said photojournalists were the reporters with their brains blown out. That was our description. And the number of writers, I was famous at the Spokesman Review for making writers cry. Not because I hit them, I never hit anybody, but because we'd go out and they would say, well, my story, here's what I need. And I'm like, you don't know what the hell you need, because we haven't talked to anybody yet. Like, we're gonna report this story, and then we're gonna decide what this story needs. And so, thanks for letting me get up my chest. But back to young people, let them come into your newsrooms. They're gonna be green, they're gonna make mistakes, they're gonna do all the things that young people do, that some of which are charming and some of which are crazy making and annoying and all of that. But they do come with good ideas and they have skills that your newsroom needs, almost certainly, to reach a broader sense of.
I'm just going to quickly echo everything that was said, and I'll just go pragmatic on you here. So what works for us is certainly just expect time commitment on your part. Like, it just has to happen. Second, some degree of structure. So that was mentioned, like regular check-ins work great, just to give someone a sense of like, well, at least there's this one point during the week or whatever where we can really hash things out. A big deal for us was discovering that, you know, everyone's different. That was the big discovery. No, it's just that, like, some folks are self-starters. Some folks are geared to get much more instruction up front, and only then the gears start, you know, going. And recognizing that early really helps avoid disappointment on both ends. Because I've had situations where I assumed someone is a go-getter and a self-starter, and we would do those weekly check-ins, and I'd be like, what's going on? It's like been 6 days and nothing happened, and you know, like, and you end up, they had doubts, they didn't know they can ask, I didn't reach out, but you know, so those were like early day pains of developing. It seems fairly obvious, but that's like big deal, like who's the style of working. And then because we have the luxury of covering a lot of issues, we always ask up front, like what is it that you're really interested in covering, like seriously passionate about, and then we say, okay, you'll also do other things that you're not passionate about, but we'll make sure that like you have a capstone project that's like on what you want to do. And that in many cases was this like a powerful driver for them to, you know, yeah, I need to do a write-up on a press release or whatever and this and that, but there's the big project that I'm working on.
There may also be places you can get other mentors, and now that I'm retired, I can volunteer Will Yerman at the University of Oregon, or Andrew Devigal. But seriously, I mean, most of, if they're students, they're probably coming with people they know who can help you mentor them, because 10 hours a week may not fit into your schedule.
I was thinking you would have time now.
Okay.
All right.
Would you like to be volunteer?
Yeah, great.
Well, we are at the end of the time of our session. I just want to thank our panelists for leading a really engaging conversation. And I think, you know, for me, the takeaway here is that, you know, we've all watched journalism models need to transform over the last few years in order to survive. And that's the same for reporters too, is our model of who is a reporter, where we're getting our stories, and our relationship with our community is critical evolution. Thank you for listening to this team, and let's give them a round of applause.